Hello everyone, so today is the final installment in my luxury long wheelbase saloon showdown. Earlier this week I talked you through our three main competitors, my 1999 Mercedes S500L, my 2007 BMW 760 Li, and this, a 2019 Audi A8L, as the most expensive car in this test by some considerable margin. In fact, about ninefold. The A8 really has a lot to prove. Now, first off, possibly because this is a new car, it does certainly feel the smoothest, the easiest, and the most cosseting. It just gets on with things. Even though in theory the engine is a little underwhelming compared to the others, a 3-litre V6 plays 6-litre V12 and 5-litre V8, it still does the job just fine. That's thanks, of course, to turbocharging and a very modern 8-speed ZF gearbox. Now, the ZF gearbox, Audi don't seem to be able to get quite as right as BMW or Alfa Romeo or indeed a few others. It's a little bit slow when it should be quick, and then it's a little bit harsh when it should be smooth. That is in the other cars that I've driven. But in this, it generally works quite well. My major criticism of when you're trying to make sort of reasonable progress is that because first and second are so short, it's not the smoothest thing. If you're being quite considered in your driving, it's perfectly fine. Now, in the intro, I will have shown my disdain for the touchscreen down here, and I want to elaborate on a few different points. This car is reasonably well equipped, although not ridiculously luxurious. It's got DAB radio, it's got an alright sound system. This car has a few optional extras on it, although to be fair, those mostly affect the passengers in the back. Everything else really isn't sort of performance related, certainly. You can spend an awful lot more money on one of these, and I'm very keen indeed to try the new S8, which is sort of out this year. That is powered by a 4-litre twin turbocharged V8 and should be a very exciting car to drive. That's very important because the A8 has historically been sold as the better driving saloon car or big saloon. I have driven the D2 S8, best known as the Ronin car, and that, even though the configuration shouldn't work, big engine pushed right far forward, is actually a joy to hoon. It's absolutely brilliant. And in comparison to a lot of Mercs of the time, it is certainly the better car. My own Mercedes is fun enough to hustle down a lane, but only in the context of it feels so wrong that it's just funny. The BMW, as you will have seen, is joyous and certainly no slouch, but its prodigious curb weight does really prevent it from being, well, that much fun. The A8 is, like the other two, not a small car, at least not by European standards. However, it's reasonably easy to place, thanks to the fact that you can still see a decent amount of bonnet. The steering wheel is okay, but it just doesn't feel special compared to the other two. The leather on it feels just a little on the cheap side, and I'd like just some more details in here that show you you're in an 8. This is a flagship vehicle. It's something that I know Audi are very proud of, and I think they should do a little bit more on the inside to show that. Little vents here that kind of disappear when you turn the car off is all very Jaguar Land Rover, but I don't really see the point. You do start to notice little details like the fact that this wood here matches up when these close. That's all very nice, and you can indeed option one of these to an extremely high standard, but I, of course, can't judge a car that is not optioned the way I would want it. Little things like the headliner in particular would certainly be a lot nicer if they were better, and of course I'm going to criticize the interior of this type of car. That's what they're all about. Having spent quite a bit of time in the BMW, which is just, well, palatial in many ways, the Audi is something of a step down. However, I do really like these seats, even though they aren't cooled, which is a great disappointment. And there are a few bits of tech which I do very much welcome into my life. 360-degree cameras, which are also not standard in this car, but part of a very reasonably priced comfort and sound pack. And I, again, don't understand. Why would you not spec your car with those? Oddly, this car also comes with front and rear parking sensors as an option, so they're not normally separate to the 360 camera. They normally come as part of that. So I don't know if there's some confusion in the spec sheet I've been given or what, but they are there. Again, they're not silly expensive, £725, but I kind of expect those as standard on a Kia at about a fifth the price. So the fact that they're not on this Audi is a shame. Other things as well. So I've got this menu up here for a particular reason. The other two cars have a sporty mode as well, although it's somewhat more basic and largely controls in the Mercedes the suspension only. The BMW then has individual modes for the electronic damper control and the gearbox, whereas the Audi can kind of bring all of this stuff together. You've got efficiency, comfort, auto, dynamic. Like many other current Audis, this car can coast for quite a bit to try and save fuel, but fuel efficiency is one of my big issues with this car that I'll get onto in a minute. The reason I've got this screen up is that this car at very low speeds can raise itself up, much like in the S-Class, but it's buried deep in a menu, and I don't see why it should be kind of hidden all the way in here and tucked down there. Being able to raise and lower the car, I think, is an essential function, and, well, it's quite important. It's got a very nice system that puts the handbrake on for you automatically when you come to a stop. So when you're in traffic, you don't have to be constantly blinding the person behind you. Yes, I know you don't have to do that anyway, but it's nice to have an automatic hold feature. Unfortunately, the system isn't calibrated quite how I would like it, because on a number of occasions, I've come to a sort of near stop and thought the car had activated the handbrake, only to then sort of, and there the car thought I was going to crash into the filling cars like this with this kind of technology, so the auto handbrake thing, which then thinks that you've kind of come to a stop, although isn't really sure, so you then let off the brake and then it suddenly goes, "Whoa!" Stupid stuff like that, where you can nearly cause an accident because the car decides to stop when you knew that you were just going around the person, and then you wind up having an accident because the person behind you piles into you. This is all unnecessary stuff. The car also has the lane assist, which on a country road is nearly lethal. Again, not unique to the A8, but worth mentioning. And I know it's something that Audi probably know people are going to get annoyed at, because there's no other reason they would make it so easy to turn off. It's just a button here on the end of the stalk. So that is all rather unfortunate. Fuel economy. Now, the Mercedes, as you might imagine, is not great. 21-year-old, 5-litre, naturally aspirated, big old Mercedes with an old-fashioned 5-speed automatic gearbox. On a run, not too bad, does about 28 to the gallon. General average is something like 21 to 23. The BMW, surprisingly, does basically the same. It's maybe about 1 mpg worse, not really worth writing home about. And for the massive extra performance, like 50% more performance or more horsepower from the engine, I think that's pretty good. 50% more cylinders as well, all need feeding, and that's thanks to the fact that the BMW is, of course, a much more efficient lump. Audi gave me a choice of A8s to get, and I wanted the petrol because I knew I was going to be doing this comparison, and I thought having the diesel would be a little bit unfair for a few different reasons. The petrol is the more powerful car, was the slightly more expensive one, so it's probably going to be a bit better specified and therefore going to be a slightly fairer car to compare. The other two, of course, also were available with diesel engines, and actually, in the case of the BMW, very, very good diesel engines that were quite powerful and quite economical. I expected the Audi to be notably better on fuel. I didn't expect miracles, but I expected it would be doing at least 30-something to the gallon. It's not. In the last 1,179 miles, this car has averaged 23.8 miles to the gallon. This is another vehicle that makes me question why it is exactly that we are downsizing. Now, the CO2 figures on this car are very good, and that's probably exactly why they've done it, to get those nice and low. Certain other Audis of late have been plagued with this kind of issue of well, a bit of lag, really, or an engineered form of lag. The throttle response initially seems quite good, and then you realise that the turbo is ramping itself up in a very, very smooth and obviously programmed way. In an A8, that is not really ever going to be that much of an issue, because it's just not that kind of car. But the 24 to the gallon, or not even that fuel economy, that's shocking. I mean, you would have just thought, I mean, I did not even check the fuel figures ahead of the test because I just took it as read that this car would be better on fuel than the 5-litre V8 Mercedes from 20 years ago. Apparently, I was wrong. Now, the official figures do bear this out because officially they claim something like a 27-odd combined figure, and that's pretty damn accurate for this car. However, you have to then start to ask yourself, well, okay, it's lovely and nice in the back and all that jazz, and it's got loads of toys and things for the kids, but what exactly is the point then of the A8? Well, fortunately, if you whack it into dynamic mode and it listens to you, you stick it in manual and you take over, the A8 does rather have something that the other two don't. It's actually genuine fun to drive down this kind of road. Now, that's not to say that you can't have fun in the other two, but this one is definitely the most adept at doing it. Now, of course, it's not a particularly playful car, and it doesn't have the sheer firepower of the BMW, but because it has 8 ratios, they are, for the most part, a little bit shorter, and that helps it make up the shortfall. It's also got more torque lower down, and it rides ludicrously well. You can make slightly silly progress in this car. The paddles are not particularly nice to use, but the gearbox responds well, and it's a way better setup than the Beamer has, meaning that you can do kind of inappropriate things with this car. The car very quickly shrinks around you and becomes something really rather entertaining to pilot. It's things like this that make me want to try the S8 even more, because that car, of course, is a short wheelbase version, so it should be a little bit more agile. It has the 4-wheel steer on top of that, I believe, which is an option for these that this does not have. One thing that this car doesn't want to do very easily is go into reverse. That seems to be a common problem with Audis at the moment, and I don't know why that is, because it's never been an issue that I've had before. Right, let's have fun. The engine only revs out to about 6,500, which in this car is not really an issue, but this engine does see service in other slightly sportier vehicles. In there, it's more of a problem, but for this, it's fine. What is most surprising, though, is that actually, very similarly to the 7 Series, you hit about 4,000 RPM and it really picks up. Most turbocharged engines, once they get to about 2,500, they're already giving you as much as they could, but this one, there is actually a real reward for keeping it in the upper reaches of the rev range. And when you do so, throttle response is improved. That lag does seem to go away a little bit, and you really can throw this thing down the road. You've got to be aware of the fact that it's still a relatively smooth, soft, cosseting vehicle. But I have to say, one thing I love about all 3 of these cars is the fact that sport mode is actually worth using. Dynamic is actually worth using. Normally, I have an individual setup where I configure everything to dynamic except the suspension. However, because the suspension in all of these cars is actually set up how I would want it, that makes dynamic mode actually worth using, and that makes such a big difference. So the A8, look, if you're looking for a new saloon, I have driven, as you may have seen from this week's bonus video, the current S-Class, and again, that's a car that I think actually, as standard, feels perhaps a little bit more special than this, but isn't anywhere near as good to drive. The 7 Series I have no experience of, so I simply cannot comment. The all-wheel drive system in this thing works very, very well. It's not a Haldex system, it's the proper job. You can feel the car washing wide a little bit and pressing on, but then it should do. It's a ruddy 2-ton barge. However, it's a 2-ton barge that is an awful lot of fun, and in this car I can really feel the spirit of the original S8, which is still one of my favourite kind of big luxury cars to drive. It's just a silly car, a lot of fun indeed. Really looking forward to the new version of that, but if you are the sort of person that enjoys driving your luxury saloon, the A8's worth considering. However, if you want to spend time in the back, I think it really is probably the S-Class that still has it. And in terms of this week's cars, who wins? Well, the truth is that there's not really much of a competition, is there? Because they're such different cars at such different price points. However, I'm not going to say that they all get a medal for competing, because that's just not the case. The winner here, the moral winner, I think has to be the BMW, because this thing is still expensive to run thanks to its fuel economy. Yes, the BMW is definitely going to be the least reliable of all of them and the most demanding in terms of maintenance and all that jazz, but it also provides you with a kind of theatre that the other two simply lack. I mean, even when it's broken, the BMW is still a very special thing, marvellous car, and just an event. And that, I think, embodies all of what Big Saloons is about. So there we have it. Thank you all for watching. Please like, comment below, subscribe if you haven't already. We'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.